So let's talk about the Department of Education and how it's destroying America and soon will be destroyed. Oh, yeah. So it might have happened by now as I was preparing for the show, but today, President Donald Jaquan Trump is set to sign an executive order abolishing the Department of Education. Now, I don't know what the timeline for that would be. I know it shouldn't be something immediate. I would assume that's something with a relatively quick rollout, but I want to really explain to you guys why the DOE is such a failure. Because because I didn't know much about the Department of Education up until really starting at PragerU, to be honest, because we're so education focused. And I started doing some research on them and I was like, okay, this is really, really bad. So even when I heard like at first the conversations about the abolishing the DOE, I was like, whoa, like that's a lot. But now I understand why. So let me just give y'all a little rundown on how bad the DOE is and how we went from being ranked #1 in education in 1979 when the Department of Education became this federal institution versus nowadays where we can barely maintain our spot in the top 30. So if you don't know what the Department of Education's entire purpose is, they were established in 1979 to promote student achievement and ensure equal access to education by administering federal funding, enforcing education laws, and supporting schools and colleges nationwide. Now, how they go about doing that is some BS. First of all, when it comes to the funding, what they're really doing is they take the state's dollars, slash the dollars in half, and then they give it back to the states and say, go do some woke stuff with this. That's literally how it works. If you go and you look at the entire operation, the entire flow of cash from state to federal agency, then back to state, that is the cliff notes of what's happening. They literally cut the money in half and they tell them now go fund something stupid. That is how the Department of Education works. Now, I have literally a list of failures that I want to read to you guys because I need you to really understand how messy the Department of Education is. We were #1 in education. We plummeted all the way to #4 in education. You now have 85% of Black students that are illiterate. They lack proficiency in reading skills. That makes them deemed illiterate. Reading proficiency of white students is only about 42%. So it's still low. It is still low. And the percentage for Black students, it might fluctuate here and there about 5%, but still you have over 80% of Black students that are illiterate, that lack in reading proficiency. You also have over 80% of Black fourth graders who are not proficient in reading, to be more specific. So it starts very, very young and it goes all the way until they get older that they cannot read. Then you have the total U.S. student loan debt because they're in charge of all the student loan situations. Why on earth do we have over $1.5 trillion of student loan debt in our country? I believe it's now at $1.75 trillion in student loan debt. Okay. And that's just U.S. student loan debt. When it comes to federal student loan debt, that's 1.7. That's held by 42.7 million borrowers. You have 43 million students in debt to the government because of their education. That is not the point of the loan. The loan is not to put you in debt and financially behind. The loan is supposed to help you get an education that can help you afford a more quality lifestyle. Why is the government giving out loans to keep you in debt so that you get into a career that can't afford to pay it off? Okay. And if you want to educate yourself more on student loan debt, go to meritstreetmedia.com and look at my episode on Dr. Phil. We had an extremely viral clip where I pretty much told somebody, like, y'all are going and getting these degrees that have nothing to do with money, basically, where you're not going to make any money. And then you're shocked that you're in all this debt. I remember there was somebody on there that was $150,000 in debt to learn how to cook. And shout out to Bradley. He's a really nice guy. He's actually low-key based. Don't be fooled. He went $150,000 in debt to learn how to cook. Like, you cannot be serious. I actually have that video pinned on my Instagram if you want to go see it. Plug in my own Instagram, on my own YouTube, and I would do it again. And, more things. 61% of ACT tested Black students in 2015 met none of the 4 college readiness benchmarks. See, I'm sitting here stuttering. I sound like I can't pass the college readiness, but I actually did great on the ACT for the record. But 61% failed across the board when it comes to college readiness. And 31% of all students also failed. So that's still a lot. That is still a lot of failure where you have that many students that aren't up to par in one of any of the 4 benchmarks, which I believe were reading, science, math, and writing. I can't remember. I took the ACT a long time ago, child. It's about to be my 10-year reunion from high school. And then again, California, you have this really wealthy state. Only 30% of California high school students were ready for conditional reading or only 30% of California high school students were ready conditionally for college work when it comes to math and English. Okay. California has all this money coming from the DOE, and you're telling me only 30% of students are ready for college? What is the point of even being educated? What is the point of even having college if you're sending these students there? We just talked about a couple weeks ago how there was a girl who graduated with a 3.5 GPA and a bunch of scholarships, and she literally was unable to read or write. She was truly illiterate and still graduated with honors. Okay, why is the bar in hell? Math proficiency, similar scores. 84% of Black students lack in math proficiency. And the reason I keep highlighting with Black is because since everybody wants to be so woke, and since the Department of Education is so woke and they're always talking about minorities, why aren't they doing what they got to do to make sure that Black students are up to par when it comes to education? No, they're more focused on affirmative action so that students graduate and then get into a college that they're not qualified for, rather than making sure that these students are qualified beforehand. So this is a problem. So the solution that comes here is that education is best suited when the education is best suited when the education is localized. We need to make it to where the state and localized institutions are who are taking care of educating the children. It's much more hands-on. It's much more cost efficient. You have less bureaucracies. You have a lot more attention to detail when you have local education prioritized the way that it used to be. When all these students were excelling, it was because we had state education standards rather than these federal education standards that are overbearing to everything. Okay? If you want to change the fact that 84% of Black students lack in proficiency because you're so pro-Black and you're so pro-affirmative action, then we need to demolish the Department of Education. It is time.